So in today's video I'm going to explain in simple terms how to start wild camping in the UK. You've probably seen some videos on YouTube or some fabulous photos on Instagram or Facebook showing just how cool wild camping can be. But you may have no idea where to start, so in this video I thought I'd give you a few hints and tips and explain in simple terms how to get on your way when it comes to wild camping. As you may already know, wild camping isn't strictly legal within the UK. There are some exceptions to those laws. I'm not going to go into all the legalities of wild camping in this video, but I will put a playlist at the end of the video which will go into things like legalities, choosing gear, all that kind of stuff in a little bit more detail. So where do you find the inspirational places to go wild camping? Well, one of my first ports of call is to have a look on YouTube and see where people have already been camping already. This should give you some idea of what is actually possible. You can then also go and check these locations on Google. Google's got like a Street View version where you can even get up in the hills, check out some of the views and find out if there's somewhere suitable to pitch your tent. You can also check there to see if there's any places close by to safely park your car. So once you've decided where you're going to go, you can then have a look online and plot your route from the car all the way up to the place where you're going to pitch your tent. You can see how far you're going to have to walk, and then you can print out your map and use that for a reference when you're out on your hike. I'll leave a link in the description where you can do that all online free of charge. By the way, if you find anything in this video useful, please hit the like button. Once again, in the playlist at the end of the video, I'm going to do a full gear loadout so you can see actually the sort of things I take on a trip. But that doesn't mean that you have to take exactly the same sort of things as me. But you are going to need the basics such as a tent, a sleeping bag, a sleeping pad or mattress, and a rucksack or backpack to carry it all in. You're also going to need suitable clothes for the temperatures and the weather conditions, but I'll talk about those a little bit later. So when it comes to your sleeping pad and your sleeping bag, you do need to bear in mind that these are temperature rated. Not all sleeping bags and pads are equal. With sleeping bags, the company that makes them will usually list a limit rating for them and a comfort rating. The limit rating is the temperature that the bag will probably keep you alive, but the comfort rating is the one that you want to have a look at. That is the one that's going to allow you to have a comfortable night's sleep at the temperature stated. I do always take those temperature ratings with a little pinch of salt, so if it says it's comfortable down to -5 degrees, I wouldn't really use it below 0, but that is my own personal preference. You'll find out, when you come to try it. When it comes to your sleeping pad or mattress, they are usually measured in something called R value. All that's doing is telling you how much insulation you're going to get from the pad from the cold ground. Again, that's for another video, but the higher the R rating, the more comfortable you're going to be in colder temperatures. Bear in mind that a lot of cheap air mattresses have no insulation whatsoever, so they're only really suitable for warmer temperatures. So the rest of the gear that you take is usually down to personal preference. So you may want to take a stove because it's really nice to cook up some hot food when you're pitched up in your tent. But you can get away with just taking a few sandwiches or chocolate bars, things like that if you want to. So a stove isn't essential, but I recommend it. You're probably going to need to pick yourself up a headlamp or a torch because there are very few street lamps up at the top of the hills. I do recommend checking out people's gear videos and lists just to give you some kind of idea of the things that you're going to need. Before you go rushing out to buy all this kit, it's well worth asking some of your friends and family to see if they've got anything that you can borrow. Usually someone's always got a family member that's into camping, and it's better off doing it on the cheap to see if you like it before investing in big bucks in things like a rucksack and tents and things like that. It may save you a lot of money if you find that camping really isn't your thing. So now you've got a rucksack full of gear, I recommend you testing it out first at home, in the garden or in your local park. The last thing you want is to be at the top of the hill and find that you don't know how to pitch the tent or your stove doesn't work. You'll probably find on your first camp that you take way too much gear and that you don't use it all, but if you want to take things like an extra jumper or your teddy bear, then that's entirely up to you, as long as you're happy carrying it. At the end of the day, you want it to be an enjoyable and comfortable experience. And after you've camped a few times, you'll probably leave those things at home. I'll quickly touch on the clothes that you need. I always take an extra pair of socks with me, so if you've got wet feet or you're hiking many miles, it's always good to change your socks out. But I don't always take a full set of extra clothes. I do tend to wear things like synthetic trousers and t-shirts. They do wick away the moisture very well. And I don't recommend wearing cotton, as once it's wet, it doesn't have any sort of insulation value and it quickly saps away the heat from your body, so it is possible to get hypothermia even at temperatures well above zero. You don't have to, but I always take a merino base layer with me, so I use that to sleep in, but it also gives me an extra layer of insulation should it turn a little bit chilly for very little weight. Merino wool is a great insulator, and even when it's wet it holds 80% of its insulation value. A fleece jumper is a great mid layer, and I always take some kind of waterproof jacket with me as well as waterproof trousers. You may want to consider getting yourself a cheap down jacket, as they pack down really small and they're great for having on when you sat around camp and in your tent. Being cold and wet when you're up in the hills is pretty miserable, so having decent waterproofs and warm clothes, it makes it a much nicer experience. You're also going to need some suitable footwear. It doesn't have to be hiking boots as such, but it needs to be comfortable, as you may be putting a lot of miles in. Just make sure whatever shoes you wear have got a decent grip. So you've got your route planned, you're all togged up in your waterproof coats and stuff, rucksack on your back, but before you go, please check the weather forecast. The last thing you want is to be heading up the hills when there's storms, thunder, lightning, all that kind of stuff, and you've got a tent pitched on the top of a hill. But if the weatherman gives you the thumbs up, it's time to get ready for your trip. When it comes to the day of planning your trip, make sure you give yourself plenty of time to get to where you want to pitch your tent. Walking up a hill can be a slow, laborious process, and you don't want to be pitching up for the first time in the dark. A 5-mile hike, including hills, might take you a few hours, so make sure you give yourself enough time to be able to get up there and to pitch your tent just before the sun sets. If you've chosen a very popular location, wait till everyone's left before you pitch your tent. It's normally an hour to half an hour before sunset before I start pitching up. However, if you've not seen a soul up there all day and you're somewhere very remote, then you're probably okay to pitch up a little bit earlier. When it comes to pitching your tent, make sure you find somewhere pretty flat where there's no rocks and boulders underneath where you're going to sleep. That can make for a very uncomfortable night. If you've got a cheaper tent, it may not be as robust and might not have tougher materials like some of the more expensive tents, so you're probably better off pitching your tent somewhere a little more sheltered and not directly on the top of a hill. The winds can change very quickly on the summits and can be quite brutal, and the last thing that you want is to have your tent blown down. So you're probably going to want some supper whilst you're sat in your tent. The dehydrated meals that I use are really easy. You simply boil up some water, give it a stir, and in 5 minutes it's ready to go. These can be a little bit expensive, so if you want a cheaper option, things like pot noodles, super noodles, and even boiling the bagged rice will make you a substantial meal for a fraction of the price. If you want to jazz it up a little bit, you can add a little bit of sauce and some chopped up pepperami. But just because you're out camping, it doesn't mean you can't have proper food. If you want to take steak or salmon up with you, then go for it, I say. One quick tip though, if it's really hot weather, take it with you frozen. So by the time you get to where you want to go, it's probably just defrosted and it's ready to stick in the pan. You will probably need some snacks as well to keep your energy levels up as you're hiking up. I tend to go for something like M&Ms because I'm not into dried fruits really. Ideally you want something that's got a lot of calories for very little weight, so things like nuts and chocolate bars have got a lot of fat in them, and they obviously carry a lot of calories with that. You're also going to need to stay well hydrated throughout your trip, so for an overnighter I typically take 2 to 3 litres of water, but sometimes if I know that there's going to be water in streams along the way, I don't always take that amount with me. A litre of water weighs a kilo, so it's quite heavy on your back, so you can use a water filter which will make stream water safe to drink. But you can also get things like aqua tabs, which will you just drop them into a litre of water and then after half an hour it's safe to drink. Definitely don't recommend drinking straight from the stream. Experience has told me that you can have a dodgy tummy from that. If you have any doubts at all, then get some water in a pan and then boil it up on your stove, and that should make your water completely safe to drink. So also on your trip you're going to need a first aid kit and some kind of hygiene system. I've seen people taking first aid kits that are this big that have got splints in and all sorts. If you're on some kind of expedition then you'll probably need that, but I don't know how to use all that kit, so for me all I really need is things like a small bandage, plasters, things that's going to sort out a blister or a cut. If I need anything more than that, then I'm going to probably require the emergency services anyway. Although it's not strictly first aid kit, I would always take your phone, because that way, in case you fall into any trouble, you could always dial 999 or 112 to call the emergency services. Camping can be quite dirty, so take something like a flannel or some wipes to keep your hands clean. I also take some hand sanitizer, but you are going to need some toilet paper just in case you get a call of nature. If that happens, you need to really head at least 50 metres away from your camp, any water source or the footpath. Dig yourself a hole of at least 6 inches deep and then take aim basically, and then cover it over, but make sure that you don't leave anything such as wipes that's non-biodegradable. I take a little trowel with me in case I need to dig a hole, but you can just use a stick or a trekking pole if you haven't got one with you. So you're almost there now. There's just a few more things that I need to let you know. Firstly, when it comes to camping in the hills in the UK, you shouldn't be making any sort of fire. You're okay to use a little gas stove or alcohol stove, but no barbecues and no massive campfires. At the end of the day, this land belongs to somebody else, so you could be prosecuted for criminal damage if you left any sort of fire scar. Last year, one of my favourite beauty spots, Bamford Edge, was badly damaged where somebody had left an unattended barbecue. Burnt down half of the edge, causing loads of damage. Another thing, you'll probably find that you're a little bit scared when you go wild camping on your own for the first time. You will hear lots of little noises throughout the night from creatures like birds, foxes, even little insects that you can hear crawling up the outer wall of your tent. But all of these creatures are more scared of you, so try not to worry about them, and you can always stick some earplugs in to try and block out any noises. So being outdoors is awesome for both your physical and your mental well-being. Soak it up and enjoy the experience, and then when you've done, make sure you take all your mess away with you and leave no trace whatsoever, and that way everybody else can enjoy the same experience as you. So if you want to delve deeper into everything that I've spoken about in this video, then check out this playlist where I talk about everything in greater detail. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.